Imagine buying two identical pieces of furniture, same shape, same color, same material. The only difference is that you assembled one yourself, following those absurd picture-only instructions. The other arrived already put together. Which one is worth more to you? The answer seems obvious. They are identical. They should be worth the same. But they are not. People systematically place a much higher value on furniture they built themselves, even when the final result is objectively more flawed. Even when there are crooked screws, a drawer that doesn't slide properly, one leg slightly shorter than the others. This phenomenon has a name. It's called the IKEA Effect. In 2011, three researchers from Harvard Business School, Michael Norton, Daniel Mochon, and Dan Ariely, decided to test this intuition. They asked participants to assemble IKEA furniture, origami, and other do-it-yourself objects. Then they asked them to put a price on what they had built. The result was striking. People were willing to pay up to 63% more for objects they had personally assembled, compared to identical objects already put together by a professional. But the most interesting part of the study is not this. The researchers also observed what happens when the task is left unfinished, when the furniture stays half-built, or when the completed object is destroyed right after assembly. The effect disappears completely. There's no more attachment, no more perceived value, and here we arrive at the heart of the discovery. It's not effort itself that generates love for something, it's completion. It's the act of finishing something with your own hands that transforms an ordinary object into something precious. Let's pause for a moment and think about how many areas of our lives are governed by this same mechanism, even though we never call it by this name. Think about parents who describe their most difficult child as the one they feel closest to. That's not a coincidence. The child who demanded more effort, more sleepless nights, more battles paradoxically becomes the one perceived as most precious. Think about romantic relationships that began after a long, complicated courtship full of obstacles. People tend to value these more than relationships that began easily and immediately, not because they're objectively better, but because we invested effort into them. Think about a work project you've poured hours and hours into. Even when every signal clearly says it's time to let it go, something inside you resists. This connects to another cognitive bias closely related to the IKEA effect, the sunk cost fallacy. The more we've invested in something, the more painful it becomes to abandon it, even when moving forward no longer makes any rational sense. But let's return to the most elegant discovery of this study. The IKEA effect isn't about the object itself, it's about the relationship our brain builds between effort and identity. When you build something with your own hands, in that moment, you're not just assembling pieces. You're projecting a part of yourself into that object. The furniture stops being a neutral object and becomes an extension of your competence, your patience, your ability to complete something complex. This is why failure in this experiment is so devastating to perceived value. If the project isn't completed, that projection of identity is interrupted halfway through. There's no story left to tell yourself, no competence left to celebrate. This principle has enormous implications far beyond IKEA furniture. Think about parenting. Pediatricians and developmental psychologists have long known that involving children in small tasks, even imperfect ones, even slow ones, even less efficient than doing them as adults, builds a sense of competence and belonging that no ready-made object could ever provide. Think about education. A student who solves a difficult problem alone, after getting stuck multiple times, develops a completely different sense of mastery, compared to a student who has simply shown the solution. And finally, think about therapy. Many therapists know this principle well, even without calling it the IKEA effect. A change that a patient builds through their own work, their own effort, their own trial and error, has a completely different therapeutic value than advice received passively, no matter how correct that advice may be. So the next time you're assembling IKEA furniture, cursing at the instructions, remember that you're not just building an object, you are, quite literally, building a piece of the value that thing will hold for you. And maybe, the next time you're about to give up on something difficult, a project, a goal, a relationship, it's worth asking yourself, am I letting this go because it no longer makes sense, or am I letting it go right before completion, losing the greatest value of all,